Native American proverbs are windows into the wisdom of indigenous cultures, offering profound insights in succinct and poetic expressions. Rooted in a deep connection with nature and community, these sayings transcend time, carrying universal truths. This introduction invites exploration into the rich tapestry of indigenous wisdom encapsulated in Native American proverbs. Immigrants and Native Americans have made our country what it is today, and if we've learned anything through these hundreds of years, it should be that we can accomplish more when we work together. If aliens visit us, the outcome would be much as when Columbus landed in America, which didn't turn out well for the Native Americans. As a Cherokee, I can attest to the fact that Native Americans have been on the losing side of history. Our rights have been infringed upon, our treaties have been broken, our culture has been stolen, and our tribes have been decimated at the hands of our own United States government. It almost seems that nobody can hate America as much as Native Americans. America needs new immigrants to love and cherish it. I believe Native Americans, women, and all of us deserve representation, and that we all need to fight with everything we have to make it so. Native Americans are the original inhabitants of the land that now constitutes the United States. They have helped develop the fundamental principles of freedom of speech and separation of powers that form the foundation of the United States government. My father, when I was a kid, was so deeply involved with Native Americans, he used to bring home these extraordinary headdresses and pipes. The contributions of African Americans, Native Americans, and immigrants throughout our nation's history are undeniable, but the tendency to overlook their gallant efforts is pervasive and persistent. Native Americans have faced centuries of atrocities to their people, their land, and their culture, all under various presidents who took an oath of office to preserve, protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States. America is, and will always be, a success story. We have African Americans, Native Americans, Hispanics, and members of other ethnic groups elected to positions inside our governments. Like Native Americans and African Americans, women and LGBTQ people, Puerto Ricans should be seen as part of the same overarching struggle for equality, in a nation whose greatest vice is the perennial failure to practice the virtue it preaches. I always understood my ancestry, like that of so many others in the Gulf Coast, to be a tangle of African slaves, free men of color, French and Spanish immigrants, British colonists, Native Americans, but in what proportion, and what might that proportion tell me about who I thought I was? I've always been interested in the history of the West, our country, and particularly as it relates to the Native Americans, the original Americans. Here, we tell the story, why the people came here, what they did when they got here, going back to the Native Americans and coming all the way forward. I've come to the point in my life where I encourage young Native Americans to become much more selfish about their personal needs and wants. One could reasonably argue that the Turkish pogrom against the Armenians during World War I qualifies as a crime against humanity, as does the United States ethnic cleansing of Native Americans. America is made up of people who came from someplace else. Even the Native Americans came over the Bering Strait. America is what it is because people came from someplace else. What we are doing in the United States is we have launched a television station for mainstream audiences, which means whether they are Native Americans or people living from any part of the world. Through the years, I found we had Native American blood in us. My great-grandmother came from the island of Martinique, and they hooked up with the Native Americans of Louisiana. The public, the whites, not just in Oklahoma, but across the United States, were transfixed by the Osage wealth which belied images of Native Americans that could be traced back to the first brutal contact with whites. One of the first things people think of when they think of Native Americans is reservations. We didn't have any idea what that was. We were just young kids growing up in normal blue-collar America. In New Mexico, we're very lucky that we have laws in place that really help ensure that Native Americans' right to vote is unencumbered. President Obama should pardon Leonard Peltier, or at least commute his sentence, not just for humanitarian reasons, but also as a way of acknowledging the injustice suffered by Native Americans. Many years ago, I spent $5,000 at a fundraiser to hang with another lame duck. Bill Clinton. I lobbied him to pardon Leonard Peltier, the Nelson Mandela of Native Americans. I spent my 20s earning minimum wage decorating cakes for a living. But one day, I looked in the mirror and realized I wanted more, for me and my people. I saw too many Native Americans struggling, and I realized we should have a voice in who our elected officials are. Every president since Nixon has embraced a policy of self-determination without termination, the idea that Native Americans are best equipped to govern themselves. Trump is breaking with this position. In Texas, the Rangers were established on an ad hoc basis in the 1820s to protect the settlers making inroads into Spanish borderlands. Soon, Mexicans and Mexican Americans replaced Native Americans as the prime target of Ranger repression. Edward Curtis was a photographer in the late 19th century who tried to document the rapidly disappearing Native Americans. He assembled a canon of work which, today, is exemplary and invaluable. In my own view, the life expectancy of Native Americans in the United States is one of the really great moral crises that we face. People tend to forget that in our country, we'd pretty much all be immigrants, except for the Native Americans. I always see America as really belonging to the Native Americans. Even though I'm American, I still feel like a visitor in my own country. The name reservation has a negative connotation among Native Americans, an intern camp of sorts. It's striking that Native Americans evolved no devastating epidemic diseases to give to Europeans, in return for the many devastating epidemic diseases that Indians received from the Old World.